Yandra, I am hoping that this is going to work. I am trying to go live and share with you some of the stuff that I know about the connections between Arthur Lelean, who was my great granddad, and Apolosi Nawai, who was a big mover and shaker in the colonial period in Fiji. So I was hoping that I was going to be able to share my screen with you, but now it doesn't look like I can do that. So I'll just leave that. But there are images that I'll be able to post up later on if you're interested in knowing more about this. So I want to start by saying too that Robert Nicole, who's an amazing researcher based at University of South Pacific, is working on a biography of Apolosi Nawai, or he was when I spoke to him last. And so he will be able to provide some really great insights through his work as well. His book, his original book, I think this was his first one, Disturbing History. It's so amazing. And so in this he says, Apolosi was born in 1885 in the Toka Nathavathola of the chiefly Matangali Navatulevu of Narewa village, from which the Tuinandu is appointed. And it's got information on his parents. His dad was a Methodist teacher, and then Nawai, attended the Methodist training school at Nabuloa. And then there are some claims that he was expelled from the school. And one of the main issues that Apolosi Nawai tackled during his time was regarding Fijian economic autonomy and access to land. And so he did that through his business, the Viti Company, which some of you will have heard of. So I'm definitely not going to claim that I am the only person who knows anything about this. And I'm really keen to hear from anyone who has more to contribute. So feel free to add your comments and knowledge as well, because the more we share, the more we will understand and get to know this part of history. I'm just looking through to see if there's anything else in Robert Nicole's book that I can share. But I might just go on to talk about Apolosi and Arthur. So when I started doing my archival research in the National Archives of Fiji, I found some of the letters between Arthur and the chairman of the Methodist mission, who at that time was, now I'm having mental blank. This is why I'm relying on the books, because my sleep is so broken with the kids that I am, my memory's not what it was. But he was writing to Richard MacDonald. Okay, so he was writing to Richard MacDonald around 1930. Yeah, I'm going back to my book. So he was saying there were lots of accusations coming to Arthur through the letters to say that he was an ally of Apolosi's, and that the rumours around the colonial officers were that he was disrupting order and causing a ruckus up in the northwest of Viti Levu with his actions with Apolosi. And he did seem to agree with some of the points that Apolosi had raised, even though Apolosi was exiled to Rotuma quite soon after. I think it was for most of the time that Arthur was at Nailanga, he was on Rotuma. So they weren't really around each other very much. But when I went to meet with people at Nailanga to see if anyone remembered anything, the Matani Banua there showed us and told us about how they had lived on the opposite sides of the road at Bar. Or just where the Matavelo school is. Again, my memory's really bad at the moment, so sorry. But so they were very close to each other, and then Arthur just seemed to know a bit too much about what Apolosi was doing with his own movement. So Apolosi had started the Lotu Nigauana, or the religion of the New Age, And this was something else that the Methodists were really interested in, because when he first left was exiled to Rotuma, a lot of people left the Methodist mission and went to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is at the other end of the road in Nailanga. So they had people separating out. And to avoid that, the loss of people, the loss of mission membership to another denomination, Arthur decided to try and show that there was support for Fijians retaining land and for economic autonomy. So because he could see that there was a groundswell of support for Apolosi on those points. And he had said, Apolosi had said, oh, where's that quote that I put in? He said to people in Tavua in 1917, he said, stay in your own town, dig the soil, your own soil, make use of it. Take the profit of it yourself, for this is the time for it. And the things we can do for our individual benefit in these days cannot be hidden from us. It is open to us to put money in the bank, to have checkbooks and overdrafts of over £20. So part of the trickiness of what they were doing was that Fijians couldn't own or couldn't get bank accounts established in banks at that time. So that was where Arthur came in with the work he did with Ratu Nathanieli Rowan Dronu. So he didn't seem to work with Apolosi on the BT Company. They had very similar ideas, and so he was inspired by those ideas that Apolosi had, and then worked with Ratu Nathanieli Rowan Dronu to set people up on sugar plantations up around Tavua, and I think over towards Bar as well. And so he was involved in setting up people's bank accounts, making sure that there was that access to money and a more individualistic approach to making money, earning money, and then being able to access it. But then there was still an element, even though people were kind of taking a more individualist approach and working for themselves more, Ratu Rowan Dronu was the chief overseeing it. So there was still a kind of a chiefly system in place there. And they ended up pulling a lot of money together, and I think it was 114 tambua, which they presented to the Methodist mission in 1942 and requested their own nationalist Fijian Methodist church. And that was pushed aside because it was the peak of World War II and the Methodist missionaries were arguing that they weren't ready for it. But all the work done by Arthur and Ratu Rowan Dronu in the 1930s and end of the 1920s contributed to that moment in 1942. So some of the images that I'm going to put up of Arthur Lelean. If you know of the Lelean Memorial School, that was named for Arthur's uncle, Charles Oswald Lelean, and so my granny would often refer to him as Uncle Charlie. Apparently he used to play tricks on them when they would visit at Davui Levu, which was cute. So there was a little hole in the wall, and he would put attach string to Granny's shoes, which were just under her bed. And when she went to bed, he would pull on the string, and they would move and freak her out. And I've got a photo of Gran with one of her brothers, Arthur, and their nanny, Tarusila, who was working with them in Nailanga. There's photos of Arthur with some farmers who are not named in the photos. It's so frustrating when people are not named, especially now that I've been over and met people who are also the descendants of the farmers who were working with him. Sugarcane crop. There's some images of the letters here that he wrote to MacDonald, who was the mission chairman. but I might leave those off. And there are some documents that are still held by the communities around Tabua. So if you're listening and you're from up around there, I'd really love to hear from you and just find out anything else that you know about it. It's been quite a while since I was there. I was just trying to remember how I connected in. I think my friend Barty, oh, he's my friend now, but he contacted me through Facebook and said, "Oh, my grandfather is the nephew of Ratu Rowan Dronu," and so I ended up staying with the descendants of the chief that my great grandfather had worked with. We went over and did some. I had some conversations around Jalandhara, and so I've got some photos of that, and we saw the monument that's been put up to the Toko farmers, who were the main instigators of that push for the independent Methodist Church. So Ratu Sanivalati Toroki and Ratu Emosi Tambumasi are the nephews of Ratu Rowan Dronu, and it was such a pleasure to meet them, and I was so lucky to stay with them, and it just was an amazing time. And I'm so sad that I haven't been able to go back in recent times, but hopefully as I get out of this kind of early motherhood stage, I'll be able to mobilise and get back and catch up with everyone, and we can work together a bit more. Okay, so I don't think I've got any questions coming through, but if you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to add a comment, and I will post this up on Instagram and probably YouTube as well. And I should also put in or mention some of the things that that Arthur said about Apolosi's movement, the Lotu Nagana. And sorry about my horrible Australian accent pronouncing Fijian words. Tarisi will tell me off later, hopefully. But he described it to McDonald by saying Apolosi's Lotu consists of Methodism plus prayers to Denge, Lutuna Sombo Sombo, Savu Savu, and Vosavakandua. A bowl of grog is used for prayers and then thrown outside along with his dunka or sins. Baptism is by a bowl of grog down the neck and promising to obey when the command is given. But I'm not out to make fun of those who have been deceived. They have returned, so return to Methodism. And the hotbed at Vunda, where the king kissed Apolosi's toenail, started off yesterday with Waka missionary contributions of £21, 10 as a start for this year. So I probably went overboard with the details there. I always quote too much, but that's some of it. The story about Vunda is amazing. So I think that was from the second time Apolosi went into exile. So he was arrested on the beach at Vunda, and there had been, I think the story is there's 1,060 men ready to take up arms for him. I'm not sure if they were all at Vunda, but it must have been an extraordinary scene. So that's where he was around Vunda at that time, and that's when he was then exiled. Like I said, I think that was the second exile to Rotuma. So, yeah, these are some of the things that Arthur was writing about. So he knew a lot of detail, like the figures of people who were supporting Apolosi and some of the practices that they were undertaking. And I just think that he at least had someone informing him of this stuff. Whether it was his conversations with Apolosi or not, I don't know. It seems likely if they were living across the road from each other that they were talking. So it's just a kind of logical conclusion to me, but I'm sure people would rather have a more concrete piece of evidence. But sometimes when you're writing history, that evidence just isn't there. And I know that Arthur destroyed pretty much all of his papers when he got back to Australia. So frustrating for me, who wants to know all about it, but there must have been something in that. So yeah, happy to talk more about this. There's a lot more to it, and this is a pretty quick overview. And there's so many more stories to tell about Fiji and even just the Methodist mission and its history. And I'm getting some really interesting messages through from people on Instagram, especially, who have stories that they want to tell about their lives, and stories that they heard from their family when they were growing up and that sort of thing. So keep those coming. It's so exciting to engage with you guys, and yeah, it should be interesting to see what else comes through. Okay, mate manda.